You know what is interesting? Some of the most anxious people you will ever meet look completely calm. They show up, they smile, they do everything right. But underneath all of it is one quiet fear running on a loop. What if I am not enough to keep my place here? Not enough in the friendship, not enough at work, not enough in the relationship, not enough even in their own family. And the reason this is so easy to miss is that everything on the surface looks fine. It looks like effort, it looks like care, it looks, honestly, like someone who has it together. So nobody questions it, not the people around them, and often not even the person living it. Because these behaviors don't look like fear. They look like nothing. And some of the signs are so subtle, most people never connect them to fear at all.
Here is what most people don't understand about this kind of fear. It didn't come from nowhere. It was learned. Somewhere early on, in a home, a classroom, a relationship that mattered, a person absorbed a very specific lesson. That love, attention, and belonging were things you had to earn, not things you were simply given. So they learned to perform, to be useful, to stay agreeable, to make themselves easy to keep around. And it worked. That's the part nobody talks about. It worked, which is exactly why it's so hard to let go of later. Think of it like carrying an umbrella every day because it rained once when you weren't prepared. The rain hasn't come back, but you don't know that yet, so the umbrella stays. That is what this fear looks like inside someone. A protection strategy built for a version of their life that no longer exists, still running quietly in the background of everything they do. It doesn't make them weak. It makes them human. It makes them someone who adapted. The only problem is that the adaptation never got the message that things had changed. There are 7 behaviors that show up in people carrying this fear. And what makes them so easy to miss is that every single one of them looks reasonable on the surface. Sign 1. They volunteer for things they do not want to do. Not because they are generous, though it looks exactly like generosity, but because saying no feels like handing someone a reason to move on without them. So they say yes to the extra task, yes to the favor, yes to the plan they were already dreading. They make themselves useful because somewhere in them, they believe that being needed is the closest thing to being safe. Sign 2, they check. They reread the message they just sent, looking for something that might have landed wrong. They replay conversations hours later, scanning for a moment where the other person seemed slightly cooler, slightly less warm. It doesn't look like anxiety to anyone watching. It looks like thoughtfulness. It looks like someone who pays attention. But underneath it is a person quietly auditing their own behavior, trying to calculate whether they are still okay, whether their place is still secure. And this is only the beginning. This last one is the behavior most people never connect to fear. But once you see it, you will not be able to unsee it. Sometimes, right when things are going well, when a relationship feels close, when someone has just said something warm, when the connection finally feels secure, the person pulls back. They go quiet. They create a little distance. From the outside, it looks like moodiness. It looks like mixed signals. It might even look like disinterest. But what is actually happening is a preempt. The fear gets loudest not when things are falling apart, but when things are going right. Because that is when there is finally something real to lose. So before anyone else can pull away, they do it first. They leave before they can be left. It is the most invisible sign of all, and it is also the most painful one to carry. Here is what this fear is really costing you. And it is not what most people think. It is not costing you relationships or opportunities or time, though it costs those too.
What it is costing you, slowly and quietly, is yourself. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you send yourself a message. Every time you shrink your opinion to keep the room comfortable, you teach yourself that your real thoughts are too risky to say out loud. Every time you pull away from something good before it can hurt you, you confirm the very belief you were trying to escape, that you are not someone worth staying for. The painful irony is that the more you twist yourself to avoid being replaced, the more you lose the version of yourself that was worth keeping in the first place. But here is the other truth, the one that sits right beside that one. None of this makes you broken. It makes you someone who learned to survive in a particular way, and survival patterns can be unlearned.
Imagine moving through a room, any room, just present. That is not a fantasy. That is what the other side of this fear actually feels like. Remember what we said at the beginning, that some of the most anxious people you will ever meet look completely calm, that they show up and smile and do everything right. Now you know what was underneath that. Not weakness, not neediness, not a flaw that needs to be fixed. A human being who decided somewhere along the way that love was something you had to keep earning, and who has been working that second job ever since, quietly, without anyone noticing, sometimes without even noticing themselves. Here is what I want you to take with you. The fear of being replaced is not evidence that you are replaceable. It is evidence that you learned to love people in a world that did not always make loving them feel safe. That is not a verdict on your worth. That is a story about your history. And stories can change. You were never the performance. You were always the person underneath it. And that person was never in as much danger as the fear wanted you to believe. If any of this landed for you, leave a comment. Which sign hit closest to home? I read them. And if this felt like something someone needed to hear, share it with them.